Welcome, this is Jen Frost with Faith and Fabric. And today I'm going to show you what to do when you finish a paper piecing pattern and you're left with lots of weird cut pieces like this and lots of little nubs that are like this. So often when you are paper piecing, you're using a larger piece of fabric or a scrap piece and you end up with strange cuts. Now, if you're like me, you don't like to have extra fabric left, right? I know when I start a new pattern, I like to finish off all those fabrics and use them as much as I can in that quilt. I'm not a fabric storage person. Give me a thumbs up if you're the same. And I like to finish off these fabrics so I can make room for something else. So a great tip, and what we're going to be working on today, is a way to turn all these little nubby pieces into a really beautiful, creative back for your quilt. Sound good? So these are all of the scraps over here. You'll see sitting on my cutting table that I have left from making our Tommy the Tortoise quilt. I'll actually put a picture of it here for you to see. Now, you always estimate as best you can. These are just the fabrics that are left from the honestly pretty accurate measurements that we have in the pattern. Now, whenever I put paper piecing information in the pattern related to, how much fabric you need, I always tend to just up it a little bit because that gives you an opportunity to make mistakes, to cut wrong. I am like an ultra conservative paper piecer. Like I usually end up with nubs like this size because I hate wasting, but some people aren't as conservative. So you may end up with a small little pile like I've got here. So let's get started. I'm going to show you how we're going to turn this into something really, really cool. First thing we want to do is start off with those pieces that we have that have these strange edges. So you'll see on this piece of fabric here, I've got a nice smooth edge on this side. This is probably where the fabric was cut. And then here, especially on this side here, and then even across the bottom, I've got all these weird little angles that just are going to prevent me from actually using this square piece. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to square this up. So I know this edge here at the top is perfectly straight. So I'm going to line my ruler up with that, and I'm just going to come and I'm going to trim. Now this side you'll see is almost perfectly straight. So I'm going to end up making two piles. A pile we're going to save and the pile we're going to trash. So this is going to be a trash pile. This little piece, because this is so small and so thin, there's nothing I can do with this. Now actually what I do with these is I collect them all in a little plastic bag right here. And then I use them in my Sew-A-Saint dolls. So that's a great way if you just ever need doll batting or doll filling. Usually like you use polyfill, but gosh, you're making your own filling, so might as well use it. So we'll keep that there. And then now I've got my perfect right angle edge here, and I'm just gonna keep coming around and making that right angle edge. So let's get this side done. Get that lined up. Actually, I'm gonna stick this here, make it nice and even, because we're going to come back at the end and we're going to assemble all these larger piece squares together to help make up our back of our quilt. It's going to be so pretty. I love doing this and I'm so excited. I've been wanting to make this demo with you guys for a while now. Okay, so we have our next piece cut, and now let's talk about this piece. So you'll see we have our piece here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to trim off the unusable portion. Okay, so that's probably like right about here. So again, this is so small, I can't use this for anything, but I can use this edge. So this is big enough that we're gonna make some fun little improv piecing to make a nice long panel for our back. So I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. For now, we're just gonna take this and we're gonna put it in our small little pile here that we're building up of pieces that we can reuse. Okay, and now we'll do our last side. So again, just make sure this is nice and square. I'm lining it up over here to make a perfect square, lining it up across at the top to make a nice perfect square, coming down the side. Let's see here. There we go. And we'll trim this up too. And you'll see here, I'm left with 2 pieces. This is a pretty good one. You know, if you think about 1/4 inch allowances, you definitely want to have some room. So I'm just going to trim this probably like right about here, because it gets a little too thin below this to really use. So here's a nice little nub, and here's a good nub. Same thing, get rid of anything that's below, like, for me, it's 3/4 of an inch, and I just put those in my little stuffing bag. And you'll see now you're growing your little pile here, and you're growing now this nice clean pile of squares. I know this doesn't totally fit all the way in the camera, but you'll see I've got a nice piece of fabric here now that I can actually work with. So I'm gonna speed this up. We'll go through some of those other pieces that I've gotta clean up, and we'll meet up at the end. Once you've got all your little bits cut and your good ones set aside, we're now going to come through and we're going to press these guys. It's a lot easier to work with these when they're very smooth. So I just have a little wool pressing pad here, and I'm just going to come through, and I'm really going to make all these little pieces nice and flat. Now, could you know, the question always comes up, can I just sew them without pressing them? Yes, of course you could. I find when you're working with little bits though like this, it's a lot easier to both cut them before you start your improv, for me, as it is to make sure that they're flat. Now you guys can always come through too if you want, if you like to use a best press or something like that. It's a little chillier here today, so I've got the windows closed, and you know, sometimes the lavender smell of my best press lingers a little too long. So I'm just gonna give them a good press today and even them out. So I'll go through. I'm gonna press my fabrics, you press your fabrics, and we will meet up at the end. Okay, once you have all your pieces pressed, I've got all mine up here. We're gonna now sort them roughly by size. So I'm gonna put all of my strips here. I've already sorted them by color. You know, that's it, again, this is all gonna come down to a style. You'll find that works for you. But I have them sorted first by color, and now I'm kind of doing it by size. So I've got some really long ones. Here's some little nubs. And here's, I'm gonna call these my medium nub pile here. So we'll come here next. And these are all, here's a little guy. Is a larger than medium. We'll put these guys here too. Okay, next up we've got these. Oh, this one. Now let's talk about this. So see how this one has a cut in the middle, and so it's not actually one piece right here. So with this one, what I'm gonna do is just get out my scissors and I'm gonna cut this. So now we'll have 2 pieces to actually work with here. So I'll put those in my little nubs. Okay, I'm gonna cut that little tail off and get that out of the way. Same thing here. I think this one would actually be better served if I just cut here and make myself 2 pieces. So you'll see here now I've got a nice solid piece with 3 edges to work with. On this one here, we can just come and trim this up. And it doesn't matter what shape these are, and you'll see why when we start to sew these together. Because the fun part about this is you just kind of make it up as you go along. You know, I enjoy this kind of quilting because there's no right or wrong to it. Now this is a nice big square, so I'm gonna actually just set this one over here. I'm gonna make a pile of very big squares. Here's another one where there's a little nub here. I'm just gonna cut this little nub off, put that in the little nub pile, trim these guys off. Now these are almost so small I can't really use them, so I'll put those in my tiny scrap pile. We'll put that, actually this one probably fits better with this style here. Same thing. Okay, so here's another one where, you know, if I were to sew along this edge, I would lose all that top piece. So I'm actually going to kind of square these off a little bit more. So here's one little nub. And we'll come clean this edge up a little bit. There's a nice edge. So I'll put those in my little edge piles here. Let's clean this edge off. So you see, all you're really doing now is you're just even further making these pieces more usable. And again, you're gonna probably find as you do this, you're gonna have your own style to how you like to do it. You know, do you like to trim all of your edges beforehand? Do you like to just sew them together? It's always easier for me to trim them first. I admit I don't like doing that as much. But like here, you know, like you're like, how am I gonna use this piece? You know, this part up here is honestly almost too thin. So I'm just gonna cut that off. You know, we're gonna make an edge out of this side. We'll extend that. And then we'll extend this side here too. So you see now you've got something you can actually build off from. So we'll just keep trimming a few more of these up here together. Put this one in this strip pile. We'll work with our little nubs. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna show you how, once you've got all of your fabrics into your, you know, your piles, you know, your little tiny nubs, your medium nubs, your larger ones, and then these long strips, how we're gonna start piecing them together. So I've started one little square, and you'll see that's this guy here. So this is actually made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different pieces. You can see it a little bit better on the back where the lines are. But basically I just started with one little nub, I attached another piece to it, and then I trimmed it. And then I found, okay, well now I have a wall or a side that's about this long, and I went through my piles, found a piece there, and attached it to it. And you just keep kind of building out. So that's what I'm doing here. So we're gonna keep building out, and I like to just make a bunch of squares. So I'm gonna try to square this one off, and then I'll take my squares and I'll actually stack them one on top of the other to make a really pretty improv strip down the back of my quilt. So let's head over to the machine and start piecing together. Okay, let's start putting our pieces together. So I'm gonna start with my little one here. Always start with the smallest one, and you'll see all around me here, I've got all those scrap pieces. Now, normally you wouldn't want your sewing table covered in fabrics, but you know, in this case, we're not gonna be making very big pieces. You know, once these get to be, you know, probably like say 5 or 6 inches, we're gonna stop and move on to the next one. So it's okay to have them all surrounding you, especially if you have a small workspace like I do. So I'm gonna zoom back in here, and we're gonna start first by finding our smallest little nub, and I'm gonna let you do that too. So I've got a nub. You're gonna go through your piles. You're gonna find another roughly same size nub. So you'll see these two will go together well here. They're about the same size on one side. So I'm just gonna put them together. You know, in this case, I'm working with batiks, which is great because you don't have to worry about right sides. And this is where we talked earlier why it was really nice to trim your blocks. So you'll see I didn't trim this side, and so I don't have a perfectly straight edge, but I did trim this one. And so it makes it a lot easier for me to see where my straight lines are, okay? So I'm gonna come through here, and because I did trim that one block, I know it's an annoying step to go back and trim scrap pieces, but it's just so worth it. I'm just gonna sew them together with a 1/4 inch allowance. And you don't have to be perfect here. You'll see here how this one is slightly over, and that's because it's not, you know, I didn't trim that one. It's not gonna be a big deal. So now you're gonna take your little block. I keep my little wool pressing pad close by. You're gonna wanna press these. For now, I'm just gonna do a finger press because it's part of our demo. And you're gonna end up with a little bit of a wonky piece like this, okay? Now, I'm gonna do this the right way. So we're gonna go back to the cutting table, and we're actually going to trim these edges up. You know, if you are more comfortable with this, what I would say is you can now go grab another strip piece, for example. Here you can come in and maybe grab, let's see, here's one that might work. You can grab this piece with a straight edge, and you can just attach it. So, you know, actually, let's just go do that, and then we'll go over to the table and trim it. So I'm gonna roughly make this fit on here like that. See, I've lined up this piece, this side with this side. I've got a straight edge that I can sew, and you'll see, you know, I'm sticking out up here, I'm sticking out over here, it's not gonna matter. So we're just gonna come down, we're gonna stitch. Same thing, we'll use that 1/4 inch allowance. And now we really will go over to the cutting table, and I'll show you how we're going to press this and how we're going to trim it up, and then we're gonna keep working off this same block. So here's that little nub we were just sewing together. So we're gonna open this little guy up here. We're gonna give it a quick press. press, not iron, right? And now you'll see we've got a nice, oh my gosh, this is like so perfectly heated. I love these. We've got a nice flat little piece to work with. So now we want to trim this up a little bit. So you could just grab a roller. And again, you're not really worried about specific angles. You almost don't want perfect angles because unless you're going for a square, I don't want this to look very log cabiny. So I'm purposely not going to make great right angles. What you want to do though is you want to trim it up so you've got some more straight edges to work with. So you'll see what I'm doing is I'm just kind of connecting point to point. So I'm going to take this point here. I'm going to take this point here. I'm going to connect those points and I'm just going to trim. And now you'll see I've got a much more even piece and it's just a larger nub. So you're just going to continue this process. Just keep building it out until you end up with a square. Again, going for whatever size you want. The one we're working on today is going to be roughly, let's make it even smaller just to make this demo a little easier. Let's say 5 inches wide. And then we're going to start assembling those to make this very long, very cool looking 5-inch by, 52-inch, as long as we've got that much fabric, really neat strip for the back of our quilt. Let's look at another example here. So this is one of the squares that I've been building out. And you'll see I'm keeping this guy. He actually ended up being, what is that? About 5 inches. Actually, we're still pretty close to that 5-inch mark, a little bit over. But I'm keeping him, this way roughly 5 inches, and I'm just continuing to build out. I'll come back and trim the edges here in a moment. But I want to show you, because sometimes you might end up with like a corner and be like, okay, well, I pressed, I combined these 2 pieces here because I thought this would be long enough, and now it's not long enough, and I don't know what to do. So again, this is where you're just going to be keep thinking of that corner to corner. So I need to trim this piece off now, right? Because I want to make a nice straight edge. So I'm going to come trim, cut that edge off, and now you'll see I've got a nice straight edge, and voila, here's a nice little piece that matches right up. So when I attach this here, now that's going to give me that length that I need to make this side a straight side. So you'll see you're just going to continue to build off. Now what I will say is let's just pretend I've got this piece on here. Once I'm done here, I'm probably going to come back and I'm going to trim this edge off and I'm going to stop with this block and I'll start working on my next one. I find for me, it's easier to make several, when I talk about these little improv blocks, it's easier for me to make several of these blocks and then assemble them into a long line than it is to try to just keep adding to it. You may find the opposite. You may find you just start with one block and you just keep adding sections onto it. Again, you're gonna do what works for you. There's no right or wrong way. Your whole goal, honestly, is just to get all these little nubs attached in some sort of pattern. So whether that be one big block that you're gonna put in the middle of your quilt on the back, or like me, if you wanna make a long, thin strip, then it's up to you. So I'm gonna let you guys go ahead and sew your pieces. I'm gonna keep sewing my pieces. And in about an hour of real time and in about seconds on video time, we'll meet up again and we'll share our results. So how's it coming? Let's do a little, halfway point check-in. I wanna share some of my blocks with you. So here's my first block that I've got. I'll put these other ones down here. And you'll see what I've done is I've basically just squared it off. Now the top is a little slanted and the bottom is slanted, but from here to here, I'm keeping this at 5.5 inches. And that's because I want to have a 5-inch column and obviously a 1/4 inch allowance on each side. So again, every time I'm adding sections to this, I just keep going back to my cutting table. Well, obviously I press it first, then I head back to the cutting table and I just keep trimming the edges. So this is kind of my first block. Let me grab my second block. I need an extra set of hands here. So here's the second one I'm working on. So you'll see this one's kind of more strippy looking. So I just wanted to share what happens. We talked earlier how if you do it more like a log cabin style, how it ends up building kind of out from the middle, which is the look I like more. And this one I wanted to share with you because this is more strippy looking. I don't know how else to describe it. It's got strips, like a bad rail fence, if you will. Although those go this way, so let's just stick with strippy for now. I wanted to share what could happen if you get stuck on these little triangle corners, because that can sometimes get frustrating. So you'll see what I've done here is I've just taken some little nubs and I've attached them together. And I've done that twice. This one I attached actually to a longer piece just because I wanted the nice color contrast. So what you can do with these little nubs now is you can take these nubs and you can attach them on by stitching them onto the corner, folding them up, and then you can come across eventually by making a straight edge here. So you're just going to keep building, thinking of it more like attaching a triangle corner to a triangle corner. Then I'll come over here and I'll attach this side kind of over here, and then I'm going to come and cut straight across the top. And then I'm probably going to stop with this block because again, it's starting to look a little bit too straight, too stripped for my personal taste. So I'm done with my squares. Did you finish yours? I want to show you how mine turned out, and then we're going to go over to the cutting table and I'm going to show you how you can connect them. So basically I have all these very absolutely gorgeous randomly shaped pieces that now need to be connected together. Now some of them look like they're really easy to connect, right? Like here's one with a nice straight line across the top. But you might be wondering, how do you connect pieces when they're curved like this? Here's another one, you know, the top of this isn't straight. But gosh, aren't the colors amazing? I just love this. And I'm sure probably like you guys, you remember all that fabric we had? Oops, one piece on the floor, two pieces on the floor, and this little pile is all that's left from all those trimmings we had. You guys, I love that feel of having almost like no waste when you're working on projects like this. So let's just generate a touch more waste when we trim up these blocks and connect them together into our strip. Okay, let's connect some blocks. So here is one block and here's another. Now these are roughly 90-degree blocks, and so we're going to keep that theme here. So I'm going to line my edges up and I'm going to trim across the top, making this a nice right angle. And that way, when we piece these together, we know that they're going to end up perfectly straight. So you see a little bit of waste here, but now when I go and sew these, I'll know that they're going to end up perfectly coming together. I'm just going to pop a pin in here to hold that in place. Next, we're going to talk about pieces that come on an angle. So for angular pieces, you just want to make sure that on the front, that the blocks line up perfectly straight. So if you can line them up here, and then you're just going to give them a trim right along a line. So I'm actually creating a line that's almost in between the other two. You'll see now when you move this apart, there's a trash piece on the bottom and a trash piece on top. These blocks, though, however, are going to come together perfectly even. So now when you flip them over and you piece them together, you know that they'll line up. Now, if you've ever worked with these little tails, you know, you want to kind of keep a little bit off because when you sew your 1/4 inch line, it's going to end up right there. Let me see if I can do this with my fingernail. You see how that 1/4 inch line is going to end up? That's where your fold is going to be. You'll see these are going to line up just perfectly smooth, and you're going to be able to get rid of that angular line. Now, what I like about this style is, you know, on the other one, we had cut it at a 90-degree angle, so it looked much more like a piece strip. Here, you're not even really going to be able to tell where you put these blocks together, okay? So again, we will do another one of these in a moment here, but when you pin this one, you want to pin it so you have almost like that little 1/4 inch tail sticking out on each side. Assuming you're doing 1/4 inch seams, that's what I'm doing on mine. So let's get this one lined up here. We'll sink a little pin in this guy. We'll get him out of the way. Okay, so let's see if we have any more crooked ones. Okay, so let's do these two. So we've got a crooked one here, and we've got a crooked one here. Now you'll see these are not gonna line up together. If we try to sew them, it's gonna go a little too crooked there, not what we're going for, right? So instead, I'm going to come and I'm just gonna make these, let's see here, I could come, and again, remember we did our right angle, I could go like that, and you really probably wouldn't notice that one because there's not that strip in the middle. Or instead, you can come and line it up here and make it more of an angle. Now to do these, you know, I do recommend make it straight on one side, make this side nice and straight. You wanna have that nice angle this way, but you don't wanna have it angled any other way. So again, I'm gonna line this up here, and we're just gonna cut right across here. We'll get rid of the scrap on the bottom, scrap on the top, and then we'll pin these guys together too with that little bit of a tail. Scoot over. Okay, So let's head over to the machine and we'll sew these 3 pieces together, and then we'll keep making our big, beautiful, let's call it a pillar. Let's make a long, beautiful improv pillar in our quilt. That sounds prestigious. So let's sew our blocks together. That little bit of a tail hanging off the edge. Stitch right over my pin. I know, don't tell anybody I did that. It's horrible, horrible. I like to hope I'm not the only guilty person out there who stitches over pins on occasion. Okay, we'll come with this one next. Got that pin out of the way just in time. Now here's our nice, easy right angle. So let's do a quick progress check-in. Here's the 3 pieces I just sewed. So here's the first one. This is that one that we had that more of a right angle cut. And you can see it still looks fine. You know, you got some fun little improv work in here, but it does look much more linear. I think it's okay. I don't love it as much though as some of the others. Here's another one. So this is the other one we did where it was kind of on an angle and we put those angles together. And I like this one a lot, because here's where we stitched, but because it comes on angle and it's not at a 90-degree angle, obviously they're all angles, but not a 90-degree angle, it kind of has a little bit more movement to it. Then there's my favorite one. This is that one that was on a super angle right here that we stitched. And I love the way this turned out, because this one, I feel like you can't even tell where we put this together. I love this one the most. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna continue putting these together with the ones we just made until we get the full length needed to cover the back of our quilt. So how'd your strip turn out? I love mine. Here's the full strip all the way down. So now it's actually just gonna be pretty easy. What you're gonna do is you're gonna count this just like you would any other measurement. So if you are indeed making our Tommy the Tortoise quilt, you have the measurements in your pattern for what your final size is going to be. I like to take sketch paper now, and I'll just grab a piece of sketch paper and I'll draw out the size of my quilt. Then I'll take the measurements, knowing that I've got a 5 by, what did we say this was? I think 54.5 inches, because that's the length of our Tommy quilt. I'll plot this now onto my little chart, and then I'm going to measure all those blocks that I cut up early. Remember when we were trimming our blocks, we made those nice squares, rectangles? You want to start plotting all those in. So now it just becomes almost like a game of Tetris. You want to start fitting all those pieces in, and then you're going to sew them together. And that's just going to make the most beautiful, colorful back. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on my sketch and started on my sewing. You could do the same. And then at the very end, I'm going to share a photo of how my quilt turned out. And I would love to hear in the comments how your quilt turns out.